Chapter 16 of Zhang Henshui's A Family of Golden Powder. Planting jade and asking for help from the marquis and his ruler, asking for friends. Tie the rope to trouble people and make them enjoy a cup of wine. While Zhao Lion was thinking like this, he couldn't help but look towards Liu Chunjiang. Sometimes Liu Chunjiang turns his head and his eyes meet. This really made Liu Chunjiang dizzy and restless. Just a few plays later, a dream in the garden was performed. A flower god leads Liu Mengmai to the stage to meet the sleeping Du Liniang. It was very interesting for Liu Chunjiang to watch one of the characters on the stage be affectionate and the other one be shy. I thought to myself, that person's surname is Liu, and my surname is Liu too. They didn't know each other, but they still had a way to get married. Miss Jin Zhaolian and I met each other, spoke to each other by name, and now we are sitting in the same room. Is there nothing I can do? People named Liu. Don't give up on yourself. He was so imaginative, but he never saw anything happening on the stage. Although Zhao Lion in the back doesn't understand Conopera, he has seen the newly released The Romance of the Peony Pavilion and knows the story A Dream in the Garden. Since Liu Mengmai on the stage was so charming, her heart was shaken when she saw Liu Chunjiang in front of her again. Miley turned around and said, "Hey, the frames of your ears are all red. What's wrong?" Zhao Lion frowned and said, "I feel a little uncomfortable. It must be because the air here is not good and makes me feel sad. Let's go out for a walk," Miley said with a smile. "Then you can go alone. I want to watch a show." When Zhao Lion heard that, he stood up and went out slowly. When she was not far out, Liu Chunjiang also followed. Zhao Lion stood under the shade of the tree, holding onto the tree and enjoying the cool breeze. Suddenly I saw Liu Chunjiang walking around in the corridor and looked at him. Zhao Lion was afraid that he was coming over, so she quickly turned around and ignored him. But not long after, Liu Chunjiang walked from the back to the front again, and still met her face to face. Zhao Lion was a little scared and didn't dare to stay here, but still went in to watch the show. From then on, Liu Chunjiang fortunately never came again, leaving him alone with something to worry about. Until 12 o'clock in the evening, Zhao Lion and Miley went home together. Just when she was about to go out, an old woman suddenly came up, approached her, and pulled off her clothes. When Zhao Lion looked back, the old woman squinted her eyes, put on a fake smile, and held a white handkerchief in her hand, which she stuffed into Zhao Lion's hand. Zhao Lion glanced at her and was about to ask her, but she winked and walked away. Zhao Lion was behind Miley at this time, and without saying anything, she pinched the handkerchief, as if there was something wrapped there. "I don't look at it for the moment, just pick it up and put it in my arms." She thought to herself that there must be something mysterious about this old woman, and there might be something in this handkerchief. If Miley knew that she had the temper of a child and her family would forgive her if she yelled out, but if they didn't forgive her and said she would cause trouble as soon as I went out, then I would be really unjust. So I put things on my body as if nothing happened, without showing any traces. When Zhao Lion arrived at home, she still didn't look at the thing. I didn't take it out until I was about to go to sleep and close the door. It turned out that the outside was just an ordinary handkerchief, but inside was a very small Western-style envelope, which read, "Miss Jin Zhaolian Fengqi, Liu Shang." Opening the envelope, there was a piece of white foreign paper letterhead with beautiful small handwriting. What is written on it is, "Miss Zhaolian Fengjian, I am writing this letter to you. I know it is very presumptuous, but my admiration overcame my fear, and I could not stop myself from writing this letter. I think the lady has a generous attitude, and must have extremely high knowledge. In any case, he is in front of the trend and supports social openness. Therefore, you may only laugh at me for being so high-spirited, but not for being presumptuous. In ancient times, there was a practice of tipping the balance over to seal a deal. This was the first time I met the lady. Although I expected that the lady would not be interested in me, I did have the delusion of tipping the scales to seal the deal. In the auditorium of Xia Mansion, in the living room and on the stage, when I saw the lady, I could hardly control myself. However, I have one thing to say. I am just an over-enthusiastic person, and I never dare to think of the lady's personality in the slightest. I am just a college student and have no construction at all. Even though my father had been the Governor General, he would never dare to do anything but boast about his family status in the Jin family. It's just one level. I think I'm capable of competing at the top. Just to strive for the top, I want to have a textual relationship with the lady. I don't know if it's too much to ask for, right? If Miss Ruojin really feels that she is being exaggerated, please throw the letter away and just pretend that this is not the case. When Zhao Lian saw this, her heart was just beating wildly, but she ignored it and listened quietly to see if anyone was talking outside. When no one spoke outside, he continued to watch. The letter added, "If Miss Jin doesn't dislike it, please reply to me a letter and tell me a place so that I can come and listen to Feng Zhao. Of course I will welcome you very much. Even if a woman feels inconvenienced, she can just be a literary friend who doesn't meet in person and often exchange letters. I also fully support it. My mailing address is number 8, Qingqiu Lane. Please check the phone book for my phone number. I still have a lot to say in my heart, but I don't dare to express it because I'm afraid that I will be guilty of extra presumptuousness. If we really become good friends in the future, maybe the lady can take care of me. I wish you a happy future. Admire Liu Chun on the river." After Zhao Lian looked at it, it was as if there were many people watching around her. For a moment, she felt no one in mind or body, and she felt hot all over her body. I thought to myself, these men are really brave. Aren't they afraid that I will take this letter out and ask someone to question him? I was about to tear up the letter and wipe out the traces, but then I turned around and thought, what if he writes directly to my house? The trouble became bigger. I might as well reject his wishful thinking, so I will keep this letter for now, and let me reply to him in the same way. Therefore, with the letter and envelope still in place, I opened the small suitcase where I kept my petty items and put the letter on the bottom layer, sticking it to the bottom of the box. After tidying up, I went to bed, tossing and turning. I couldn't sleep. When I woke up early the next morning, it was very early, so I took some of the letter envelopes used by Paifeng privately. When no one at home was up, he replied to Liu Chunjiang with a letter. The letter read, "Mr. Chunjiang's lesson. Your letter is so kind. I am here to stay, just a homeless woman with no knowledge and no knowledge of communication. Sir, please make an appointment as a friend. I dare not reach out to you. We hope that we can respect each other and never write to each other in the future to avoid any trouble. This is my reply." Gold Zhao Lian finished writing the letter and hid it on her body. In the morning, I pretended to go out to a yarn shop to buy cosmetics, and then threw this letter into the mailbox by the roadside. In her opinion, with this letter, Liu Chunjiang was determined not to bother her again. Unexpectedly, her letter contained just one sentence from a homeless woman, which aroused Liu Chunjiang's feelings of pity and pity. "Do you think that such a good woman, like Lin Daiyu, lives in Jia's house? It's a pity that I have no connection with the Jin family, and I don't know anything about her family's affairs. If we were to investigate specifically, it would be extremely difficult if the matter involved Gitai, and we were afraid of arousing people's suspicion." I thought about it, but couldn't come up with a clever idea. Later he thought, he might as well take the risk and write a letter. It doesn't matter if he doesn't write his name, but I was afraid that Miss Jin Zhaolian would be implicated. After thinking about it, I suddenly remembered that Yu Jianer said that he, Mengshang's fiancé, Miss Bai, knew the Jin family. Isn't this a shortcut to the south? I might as well ask Yu Jianer to investigate with me. Having made up his mind, he came to Yu Jianer's house. This Yu Jianer is also a young man. His grandfather had made great contributions in the former Qing dynasty and was a Confucian general in the Zhongxing dynasty. After his death, he was posthumously named Duke Wenji. His father, the youngest in the family, caught up with Yu Yin and became a feudal official and then a diplomat. This Mr. Yu has a single name. Although he has several concubines, they are all tile kilns, with one daughter on the left and a daughter on the right. Mr. Yu has been engaged in tile kilns for most of his life. It wasn't until he was 40 years old that he got a young master. Mr. Yu, now that he has met the conditions of having a son, there is no need to elaborate on how much he loves this young master. However, because this young master loved her too much and had someone to support him in every problem, he actually had the attitude of being like a good girl who could not help being weak. After all, Mr. Yu is a diplomat, and he is a bit arrogant. He feels that such love must turn his son into a waste. So he was specially named Jianer to break the bad habit of wealthy families hiring teachers to teach their children at home. When he was 10 years old, he was allowed to go to school. There are various sports equipment installed at home so that he can learn various sports. In this way, Yu Jianer's problem of blushing first when meeting others was cured. but he is still of the gentle lineage and does not like sports. Mr. You had no choice. He was not allowed to wear long clothes, either uniforms or suits, and he had to correct his calm attitude. But this matter is very suitable for the young man's fashionable hobby. Time is easy. Yu Jianer slowly went to college. Of course, the Chinese language is just clear and proficient. However, my English has reached its peak early, and now I am doing further studies, reading Latin and studying foreign poetry. Based on his appearance, plus his high-class family background and status as a college student, he can be considered a 90% talent. The university he attended was run by foreigners, and there was no distinction between men and women. Many girls can't help but pay attention to it, but in Yu Jianer's heart, there was no one he liked. Therefore, his classmates nicknamed him Jade Face Bodhisattva. But with Yu Jianer it's not unintentional, but I can't find anyone I like. Therefore, without telling his father, he got involved in social circles a little bit, thinking that he might be able to find a suitable person there. So in the social scene, I made a lot of new friends. Liu Chunjiang was a classmate, and they were in social circles at the same time, so the relationship between the two was relatively good, and they could talk to each other if they had anything they knew. Liu Chunjiang came to see him specially that day. He first smiled and said, "Lao Yu, do you think why I came to see you today?" Yu Jianer said, "I have no clue. How can I guess? You must give me some. I can start with the clues." Liu Chunjiang said with a smile, "It's just something that happened 2 days ago, and you were also there." Yu Jianer didn't remember a few jokes made by the Xia family, and he didn't make any guesses. Liu Chunjiang said, "You also said that day that you could think of something for me. Why did you forget it?" Yu Jianer said, "What day did you say that? I really can't remember." Liu Chunjiang said with a smile, "I'm afraid you are deliberately saying that you don't know. Don't you remember the scene in the Xia family auditorium?" Yu Jianer said with a smile, "Huh, I remember. Do you really want to eat swan meat?" Liu Chunjiang said, "You don't ask me if I'm a toad yet. Just look at this thing." He then handed Yu Jianer a letter written by Zhao Lion. Yu Jianer read the letter envelope carefully several times, then put the stamp stamped by the post office on the envelope, looked at it, and said with a smile, "Sure enough, it was not made privately. How did you get such good results? I admire you." Liu Chunjiang. So he told him the whole story of his correspondence, word for word. Then he thought, "If you don't do Zhou Feng, I will blame you, Monk Feikong." Yu Jianer smiled and said, "I think you are a little crazy when you look like this. What's the matter? Do you want me to be your matchmaker? How can I have it? That kind of qualification." Liu Chunjiang said, "Of course I'm not looking for you. Didn't you say that Misto, his lover, knows the Jin family? Can you tell Misto he, and ask Misto to investigate?" He said, "The private relationship between men and women is incomprehensible. Now you entrust me, and I entrust he Mengshang, and he Mengshang entrusts Masibi. Everyone knows, such a big detour. So how can we make it work?" Liu Chunjiang said, "What's the matter? Can't do it? I'm not doing anything illegal, but I'm just asking about her relationship with the Jin family. After asking about it, I will proceed with it through proper procedures." Asking, "What's wrong with this?" Yu Jianer said, "Although what you said is reasonable, I think you're being too affectionate. How could you talk about marriage after just one acquaintance? He is truly a bodhisattva. There are many people who fall in love with each other the moment they meet." So he smiled and recited, "I suddenly saw thousands of injustices that had happened in the past 500 years. I have rarely seen such joy. I'm so lovesick, so how can I turn my attention to her when she's gone?" Yu Jianer smiled and said, "Come on, don't talk about me and make me crazy. I can tell you that there is really a glimmer of hope. How can you thank me?" Liu Chunjiang said, "I can do anything that I can do." Yu Jianer said, "I want you to give it to me. Can I get a piano?" Liu Chunjiang said, "Oh, it's such a big gift." Yu Jianer said, "Don't you think it's all you can do? Can't you afford to buy a piano?" Liu Chunjiang said, "I can buy it, but this gift." At this point, he suddenly became excited, jumped on his feet and said, "As long as you can introduce me successfully, I will. It's nothing to give you a piano." Yu Jianer smiled and said, "Looking at you, you are really in a hurry. Just wait for your reply in 3 days. I won't take advantage of others. This is a huge rip-off of you. Anyway, if you reply the day after tomorrow, Just treat me to a small restaurant. Liu Chunjiang said, it's a small thing, it's very small. It doesn't matter which restaurant you choose. 20 yuan is the treat fee. Yu Jianer said, do you think it's a lot? Liu Chunjiang said, I don't know how many guests you're treating. If it's not a big treat, I think it's enough. Jianer said, the two of us have a drink. What's the fun in that? Of course we have to treat you. Liu Chunjiang smiled and said, don't embarrass me. I will agree to whatever you ask for. Seeing him say such pitiful words, Yu Jianer stopped making things difficult for him. Yu Jianer called He Mengxiang that day and said that he would come to his house. He Mengxiang had no family in Beijing and lived in Uncle Bai's house. His aunt's cousin Bai Yunbo was his lover. Although they were not married, they always read books together at home and played together when they went out, without avoiding suspicion at all. So they could talk to each other openly. Yu Jianer went to find them that day, and they were reading in the study. When they saw Yu Jianer coming in, they all stood up. Yu Jianer smiled and said, no wonder Liu Chunjiang is looking for a lover like that. Look at how sweet your life is. Bai Yunbo smiled and said nothing. He, Mengxiang said, why did you come here so aggressively? What's the matter? Yu Jianer smiled and said, of course there is something, and it's an interesting thing. Then he told them everything Liu Chunjiang asked him to do. Yin smiled and asked Bai Yunbo, does Miss Bai know that person? Bai Yunbo said, there were so many guests that day. I don't know who you are referring to. Yu Jianer scratched his head and smiled. That's difficult. You don't even know her last name. How can you investigate? Bai Yunbo said, there is a way. I will go to the Jin family in person and ask who came with Miley that day. Then I will know the answer, right? Yu Jianer was afraid that Bai Yunbo would not be willing to do this. But now that she has not been entrusted with an important task, she has volunteered first, which is unexpected. He smiled and said, if you are so enthusiastic and willing to do it, this matter will have a chance of success. When will Miss Bai go? Bai Yunbo smiled and said, there is no time problem. We can go today or tomorrow, or 10 days, or half a month later. Yu Jianer smiled and said, 10 days or half a month. That will make old Liu crazy. He Mengxiang smiled and said, good things come slowly. Why are you so anxious? He smiled and said to Bai Yunbo, in this case, you should go to the Jin family. I hope that all lovers in the world will become couples. This is also our duty. Yunbo said, I will only investigate who she is for you. I can't care about the rest. Yu Jianer said, of course, as long as we can do this, we won't care about the rest. Yunbo smiled and said, how can that be possible? Let me make a phone call first to see who is at home. After that, she made the call. After a while, she came back and said, their 5th and 6th daughters are at home. I will go. You wait here. Bai Yunbo's father's car has left. Only the carriage that had taken Yunbo's younger brother and sister to school was still at home, so Yunbo took the carriage to Jin's house. She was very close to Minzi and Runzi, so she went to the inner room to meet her. Minzi smiled and said, what a rare guest, long time no see. Now that I have someone to accompany me during the holidays, I have left my girlfriend behind. Yunbo smiled and said, what a joke. I am too lazy to go out because the weather is getting hotter, so I stay at home to read novels. Runzi said, my Miley said that the Xia family got married a few days ago, and Miss Bai was there. Yunbo said, I am so ashamed. I don't know whose idea it was to send me as a receptionist. I really didn't entertain them well. At this point, Yunbo was about to talk about Zhao Lian slowly, and Zhao Lian happened to come in with a tuberose bouquet. Not only was Bai Yunbo surprised, but Zhao Lian also never dreamed that the female receptionist at the Xia family would come to meet her at home today. At that time, she was a well-dressed lady, but now she suddenly became a maid, and she felt a little embarrassed. Thinking of this, she shrank back and wanted to retreat. Minzi had known what she meant, so he didn't call her name, but said in a confused voice, don't go, there's a lady here, let me introduce her to you. Zhao Lian heard this and had to walk in. Yunbo stood up quickly, shook hands with Zhao Lian and said, Miss Jin, you didn't expect me to come to your house today, did you? Zhao Lian smiled and said, I didn't expect it. Yunbo took her hand and sat down on the same rattan couch. He smiled and said, I haven't asked for your name yet. Zhao Lian said, it's the Zhao of Qingqiu and the Lion of Lianhua. When it came to the two words, Zhao Lian, Minzi and Runzi met each other and thought to themselves, this little devil can really play tricks. Yunbo said, What a beautiful name. He smiled and said to Minzi, I only know that this sister is your relative, but I don't know what kind of relationship we have. Zhao Lian was very anxious when she heard her ask this. She thought if she told the truth, it would be bad. But Minzi had heard Miley say that when they went to Xia's house that day, they called each other distant sisters. He pointed at Zhao Lian and said, she is our distant sister. Her uncle and aunt passed away, so my mother took her in to live with us, so that they could live together and have someone to take care of her. Zhao Lianyan's face had turned red with anxiety, and she broke out in a sweat after hearing this explanation. Yunbo said, so, where does this sister study? Zhao Lian was about to say that there was no school, but Runzi said for her, she is a classmate of Miley. Yunbo laughed and said, no wonder she cut her hair. I know that all the students in the Belgian girls' school cut their hair. Then he took Zhao Lianyan's hand and said, if you have nothing to do one day, come to the dormitory to play. Although my house there is not as good as this one, it is very close to the movies, dances, and the market. Zhao Lian said, okay, I will come to see you in a few days. Yunbo talked to them for a few more words, said goodbye and left. Seeing the tuberose flower ball brought by Zhao Lian inserted in the mirror frame, he asked, where did you buy this flower ball? It's available so early. Minzi took the flower ball off and handed it to Yunbo, saying, since you like this, I'll give it to you. Yunbo thanked him and went home. When he got home, Yu Jianer and He Mengxiang were sitting in the study chatting and hadn't left yet. Yunbo smiled and said, you are really talkative. I've been a guest for a while. Why haven't you left yet? Yu Jianer said, I'm waiting for your reply here. Yunbo smiled and said, Mr. Yu is finally good. He is very dedicated to doing things for his friends. Yu Jianer said, how can I not be dedicated when someone asks me to do this? Besides, Miss Bai is an indirect friend. Since she is helping me like this, I can't help but work hard. Yunbo smiled and said, that makes sense. This flower ball was given to me by Miss Jin. The sword is given to the martyr, and the rouge is given to the beauty. Please take it and pass it on to Mr. Liu, so that he got an unexpected surprise. He Mengxiang laughed and said, that's harmful to him. He has this flower ball. I'm afraid he won't eat, even if he looks at it day and night. Yu Jianer said, that's true. Old Liu is so sentimental. It's better to leave him no loopholes. If there is a way, he will move forward. Yunbo laughed and said, it's fun to play it. Miss Yu, just take it, and see what he will do. Yu Jianer is a playful person. Seeing that Bai Yunbo is willing to play, he will naturally not be content. He took the flower ball to Liu Chunjiang that day. This was something Liu Chunjiang could never have dreamed of. For the first time, he had such a good result. Hang the flower ball on the window frame. Just be fascinated by the flowers, and think of a way to move forward. After thinking for a while, he actually got an idea. He slapped the table and said, old Yu, if you help me one more time, my business will be successful. Yu Jianer smiled and said, the mansion of a noble is like the sea. You think it's so easy. Liu Chunjiang said, as long as you can help, I will naturally find a way to proceed. Yu Jianer said, I will definitely help, and help to the end. Liu Chunjiang smiled and said, as long as you help me succeed in this move, it will be enough, and you don't have to worry about it in the future. Yu Jianer said, yes, now that the bride has entered the room, the matchmaker should be thrown over the wall. Tell me, what is a good trick? Liu Chunjiang said, doesn't Miss Bai know the sisters of the Jin family? As long as Miss Bai spends a few coins and invites guests, invites more male and female guests, and then invites the two of us. Then, after an introduction, we become friends. After becoming friends, there will be no worries about opportunities. Yu Jianer smiled and said, it's a good trick. But we are alone, we on the right. Don't you feel embarrassed when you say it? Besides, what does Miss Bai want to spend money to treat her? Liu Chunjiang said, this is a small matter. If Miss Bai feels that she is not fulfilling her obligations, I can pay for it. But in this way, it will be suspected of despising her. Isn't it more offensive? Yu Jianer said, even if you are right, is it right for you to ask her to treat you? Liu Chunjiang rubbed his hands and said, what should I do? It's a pity that Miss Bai and I are not so close. If I could talk to her casually like you, it would be great. Yu Jianer laughed and said, I said so too. But it's a pity that I'm not Miss Bai. If I were Miss Bai, I could just be a matchmaker for you. Would I still need these procedures? Liu Chunjiang laughed and said, "Old you are joking with me like this. There will always be a time when you want me to help you, right?" After hearing what he said, Yu Jianer agreed to do it. The next day, when he Mengxiang was mentioned to him, he agreed, so he and Bai Yunbo sent out invitations to invite guests to a dinner at Jinghua Hotel. After some discussion, the two of them sent out 20 invitations in total. Friends of both he and Bai were surprised when they received this invitation. They were surprised because they were an engaged couple, and everyone knew about it. Logically, an engaged couple hosting a banquet together would have something to do with their marriage. However, both he and Bai were well known. If they held a wedding, would they announce their engagement? Their engagement was known to everyone. Besides, it seemed unnecessary to host a banquet together. Therefore, the guests were determined to break the silence. They sent 4 invitations to the Jin family, 3 to Runzi, Minzi, and Miley, and 1 to Zhao Lian. Miley was just coming back from outside and saw the invitation on the table, so she asked, "Hey, I don't even know these 2 people. Why are they inviting me to dinner?" She then asked the maid, who sent these invitations. The maid replied, "The 5th lady asked Anan to send them." There was something new, and she also sent an invitation to Zhao Lian. Miley said, "This is even more strange." She hurried to Minzi's room to ask if this was true. Minzi said, "You are such a grown-up girl, and you don't care about anything. Isn't Bai Yunbo, who sent the invitation, a receptionist at the Xia family?" Miley said, "Oh, yes. No wonder she sent an invitation to Zhao Lian. Zhao Lian can't go anymore. If she goes again, it will be a joke." Minzi laughed and said, "It's just a joke. What's the big deal? Just now, my sister-in-law came here and said that she must go. We should take Zhao Lian with us." Miley said, "What does this mean? I really don't understand." Runzi said, "You are a careless and frivolous person. How can you understand this? This is just a joke between the elder sister-in-law and the elder brother. Don't think that the elder sister-in-law treats Zhao Lian so well. She is eager to send her out of our house as soon as possible, so that she will be fine. Zhao Lian has no way to go out and socialize. If there is a way to go out and socialize, and the elder sister-in-law gives her some money to spend, I think she will be willing. I think that this will make the elder brother anxious. Let's take her with us on purpose, and see what the elder brother thinks." Miley smiled and said, "This is a good idea. Let's do it this way." Runzi smiled and said, "Don't talk nonsense first. The elder brother will not let her go if he knows." Miley said, "What if the elder brother blames us?" Minzi said, "How can he blame us? First, we didn't invite her, and second, we didn't ask her to go. If the sky falls, the roof will be there. Will the elder sister-in-law not take care of it?" The 3 sisters discussed the matter for a while. Miley was young and was the most optimistic. When she saw Zhao Lian that day, she encouraged her to join. Zhao Lian was reluctant to go. But since the young mistress had asked her to go, and the 3 young ladies had also asked her to go, it would be disrespectful if she didn't go. So she didn't refuse and agreed to go together. On the day of the banquet, Runzi and Minzi wore Western clothes as usual, while Miley and Zhao Lian wore gorgeous summer clothes. The 4 of them drove to Jinghua Hotel into cars. At this time, 7 or 8 out of 10 male and female guests invited by He Mengxiang and Bai Yunbo had arrived. Needless to say, Mr. Liu Chunjiang had already arrived. He was wearing a very beautiful suit today and was sitting there in a cheerful mood. To others, he was very happy, but he felt as if there was something unresolved in his heart, but he couldn't say it. There was something unresolved. When he saw the 4 female guests coming in wearing dazzling clothes and smelling fragrant, he was already dazzled. After a closer look, the fantasy imprinted in his mind was already in front of him, and his heart began to beat. Even his breathing seemed very short. At this moment, he didn't know where he was. The new female guests were already interacting with the guests. Those who knew each other naturally nodded and smiled as a greeting. Those who didn't know each other were introduced by the host. With these introductions, the 4 young ladies had approached Liu Chunjiang's seat without him noticing. Liu Chunjiang stood up as if possessed by some ghost, and stood in front of the guests. Bai Yunbo introduced them to him in order. "This is Miss Jin Minzi. This is Miss Jin Runzi. This is Miss Jin Miley." Before Liu Chunjiang could say that this was Miss Jin Zhao Lian, his face had already turned red. At the same time, Zhao Lian was also very embarrassed. But everyone tried their best to stay calm and nodded as usual. When Minzi heard that Liu Chunjiang's last name was Liu, he asked, "There is a Miss Liu at Steady Ural University in the United States. Do you know her?" Liu Chunjiang said, "What's her name?" Minzi said, "Liu Yilin, right? I can't remember clearly." Liu Chunjiang smiled and said, "That's the second sister." Minzi smiled and said, "It's strange, she looks a bit like Miss Liu." As they talked, they sat down together without realizing it. Liu Chunjiang talked in turn, and when he mentioned Miley, he smiled and said Miss Jin was involved in the Xia family's wedding that day. Miley asked, "Why? Was Miss Tua Liu there that day?" Liu Chunjiang said, "Yes, I was there too." Zhao Lian was afraid that he would mention what happened that day, so she turned around and talked to Minzi. "Didn't you say that Miss Wei would come too? How come I didn't see her?" Liu Chunjiang said, "The host here was also planning to invite her new couple. Later, I found out that they had gone to Beiyang for their honeymoon the day before yesterday." Minzi smiled and said, "It's best to travel north along the sea on this hot day. It's not dry, and very cool." Liu Chunjiang said, "Especially for a honeymoon trip, Beiyang is the most suitable place." When he said that, his eyes couldn't help but shoot towards Zhao Lian. Minzi and Runzi were both Western students, so of course they didn't mind such words. Miley was also an innocent little girl, and she didn't know what mechanical effect it was. During this time, Zhao Lian and Liu Chunjiang were the only ones who had a correspondence relationship. Sitting with him, she couldn't tell what it meant, and she always felt uncomfortable. But even so, if she wanted to sit aside, it would not be appropriate. At this time, Liu Chunjiang talked about the honeymoon, and his eyes shot towards her again. She felt really embarrassed, lowered her head, took out her handkerchief and wiped her face. When she raised her head, Liu Chunjiang's eyes were still shooting towards her. Zhao Lian couldn't help staring at him blankly, so she smiled slightly. It would be fine if she didn't laugh, but this smile forced Liu Chunjiang to laugh. Just laughing without saying anything would make him look like a fool. He was anxious to find a few words to talk to him. In his busy schedule, he couldn't find the right words, so he had to ask Zhao Lian about something completely unrelated. "The summer vacation is really too long. What lessons is Miskin taking now?" Zhao Lian thought to herself, "I pretend to be a lady, and I also want to pretend to be a female student. I would be humble if I agreed to his words." But even though she thought this in her heart, she had to say it out loud, so she could only smile and say, "I didn't take any tutoring classes, I just read some leisure books." Liu Chunjiang said, "Yes, the days in summer are too long, and reading novels is a way to kill time." "What kind of novels is Miskin reading now?" Zhao Lian smiled and said, "Just some old novels." Liu Chunjiang said, "Yes, the old Chinese novels are still interesting." "What kind of old novels does Miskin read?" Zhao Lian said, "Nothing more than Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Dream of Red Mansions." Liu Chunjiang said, "Yes, Dream of Red Mansions is a great book. I just love reading this book." As he said this, he turned his face towards Minzi and smiled. "You can't find such a great work of millions of words in Western novels." Minzi said, "Yes, but the way Westerners write novels is somewhat different from the way Chinese write novels. Chinese novels like to include everything, while Western novels are just one thing." Liu Chunjiang said with a smile, "People who come back from the New World are different after all. They can talk casually and have profound knowledge." Minzi said, with a smile, "Don't be polite. Going abroad is just a trip in vain, and you get nothing." Everyone was humble for a while, and then they talked casually. While Liu Chunjiang was talking, he kept paying attention to Zhao Lian, but Zhao Lian was guilty and had some evasive meanings. The sisters Minzi and Runzi were old and were overseas students in Europe and the United States. They were familiar with the situations of men courting them, not to mention seeing them personally. When they saw this situation, there was nothing they didn't understand. At that time, Minzi walked away as if she was going to talk to someone else, and Runzi followed her out. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.